In the last video, I introduced you all to what the Agent Development Kit was, how it was launched during Cloud Next, and the type of work and modularization that this allows you to do. It allows you to bring together multiple tools to system together. It allows you to deploy this into different environments. You can use your local models like Gemma and some other things. And you can build on top of this, which is truly powerful for people who want to get from 0 to 90 in a few seconds, right? Because with just a few lines of code, you're able to create these pre-packaged UI, but with a backup, which can call tools, which can call sub-agents, and a bunch of other things that you can do with Agent Development Kit. So going back to the story of what we're using the Agent Development Kit for, we were discussing a very interesting Medium post, which was about using that Chris and Eric actually wrote, which was about finding our tangent data sets, and it was using the ADK approach, and this was in continuity to a lot of the other efforts that have been there already on building these agent or agentic type searches, but they were more using like large LLMs with like Datastore approaches or large LLMs with like vector embeddings that I had discussed in the past. So in this scenario, what they were implementing was really simple. If you look at their code, they were implementing a Dataset Search query function, right? So what they were doing was they were sending the query to this function and saying, can you show me datasets that match these queries? Then they were fetching the live web page that was there at that location based on those queries, and they were getting the content, enriching that using web search and Google search, for example, in this case here, and then finally returning the output based on a set of instructions that was being passed to the LLM. So the LLM was kind of scoring them and providing all of these information that was requested by this search agent. So if you think about what this can and cannot do, this is extremely powerful in a scenario where you want to fetch the most recent, the most live versions of pages. Of course, it adds some sort of a burden to the where the pages are actually hosted. It could create scenarios where you would need to make sure that those links don't get broken and there isn't any deployment changes or updation that needs to happen in the way in which you're scraping a website or the way in which you're reading a website, right? It also needs to take into account that there might be certain robots.txt files and certain other factors that needs to be taken into consideration when you're building those systems. So while this is a very powerful approach, my idea was a little bit simpler in terms of going back to what I had already deployed for the community catalog and asking myself like, hey, listen, I have already built this data store, which is storing all of this data from the main catalog, from the community catalog, and the community catalog and main catalog JSONs. What if I could use the same search bar that you already have built in, and you can ask questions? For example, like I'm asking it, give me a list of all high resolution land use land cover data sets and their licenses. And if I hit return, you'll notice that it's basically returning all of these data sets. It's giving me a link, and I can then click on the link to go to a specific data set if I wanted to go there. So why not use this data store that's already there, because it allows me to keep the data stores and read from private sources. So for example, if I have certain things that I know are not there in the public internet, or are papers that are not necessarily published out there somewhere externally, or a white paper that I want to keep internal but still be able to query, this could provide like a middle ground for mixing and matching between what is publicly available versus what is privately available. And it also allows you to do this using a set of routines where you can say, I want this data source to be updated once daily or things like that. So Datastore is an approach like that. Now, if you really wanted to build and get started with your own data source, by the way, so I would just recommend you go into console.cloud.google.com, and you will basically have a section that should talk about AI applications. And if you go into AI applications right now, you can click on data stores. And once you go into data stores, you can click on a create data store, and this will allow you to create data stores on different things. So you can use a website content, a BigQuery, or cloud storage, and so many other connectors. You can even connect it to your Google Drive and a bunch of other things if you wanted to connect to those services. In our situation, we have connected it to cloud storage as well as to website content, which is why it's able to get these feeds from the community catalog as well as read the main catalog and the community catalog JSONs. Okay. With that in mind, the implementation itself was how do I get this search, make it work with ADK so that the ADK actually calls this search and in the backend gets the response and then enriches it using Google search, basically the same way in which the main function was doing it, right? So here's the tool that I ended up building, which was, like there's a section here. This tool will be made available, by the way. And one of the things that you will notice here is that I'm only adding two functions, right? I'm adding here a Datastore function. So there's a tool section here. And if I go into Datastore search, what this is doing is it's using something known as the discovery engine, which is the engine that the search bar was actually using. And it's making those calls. So you'll notice here, it's discovery engine, and it's making those calls, and it's taking a bunch of these parameters that go into it. So whether or not to include lower relevant content, whether or not to include like a preamble or a set of instructions that we might be giving it. But we wanted the output to be as raw as possible. So right now, all this tool is doing is making the request on the user's behalf and then returning back three things. One is the citation, the other one is the actual answer content, and then it's also returning back all of this structured data that it can find. So anything on ID or title or license types and things like that, it's able to return that as much as possible. And that's what this tool is entirely doing. One of the things that I would like to stress fundamentally about using this tool though is not just this tool, and for doing these experiments on your own, even when you're using Cloud ADK, is to install the Google Cloud CLI. The Google Cloud CLI basically does these authentications in the backend for you, so you don't have to worry about the fact that you need to get a separate JSON file with credential information that's stored in it or anything like that. If you are authenticated using a Google CLI, you'll be able to use that directly. And that's actually mentioned in one of the requirements where I go ahead and like put this in the requirements. I actually say like how to get to the Google CLI, but more importantly, how to initialize it and make sure there's a project that is associated with the work that you're trying to do. There are some differences in the end file. In the last video, I think you remember I showed you the end file, and the only thing you had to put in was your Google AI Studio key, which was the free version of the key that you can do, or you can use Vertex AI if you wanted to. But in this case, we need a few extra things, which was the discovery engine pieces. Remember, like I said, we're using a separate service. This is an app that's built by Google that basically does this search for you, does the summarization, and has this extra capabilities. So we wanted to leverage that. So hence the discovery engine ID and discovery collection ID and a bunch of other pieces are actually inputted here. And you can look those up in the discovery engine API documentation. It'll talk about a lot of these pieces and how to get to those. Okay. With that out of the way, I wanted to run this and show you how you can do the same amount of search. And like I said, the agent itself, if you notice, if you go to the agent itself, you'll be able to see how the agent is actually performing. The agent itself is really simple. The agent has a batch of instructions that it's getting in terms of what kind of information that a user really wants. It has two, I would call it like sub-agents that can call tools. And these sub-agents are the Datastore agent. This is what actually talks to that Datastore, like I was talking about. And this is one of those scenarios where it's also enriching the data using the Google search engine, right? So it basically tries to do that. You'll notice here that we are adding some extra parameters. The extra parameters refer to the fact that with LLMs, you have a range that with generative LLMs, if you have a very high temperature, if you set the temperature parameter to be really high, that it has the capability of being creative and sometimes even hallucinate with the answers. So we want the search answers to be as close as possible to reality. So we want it to stick to facts. So we are passing it in the instructions, but we're also limiting the temperature config to be just 0.2, which is much more deterministic in terms of output. Okay, what this really means is, like I said, it's basically doing the search, returning back the search result, and it's using the Google search and the data that's being returned from the data store and mixing it together and saying, hey, that's great. I can now search against this data store first, which has all of the community catalog pieces and the main catalog pieces. And then I can also go to the World Wide Web and I can actually look for additional information to enrich this experience. Okay, so we are going to run this right now. I'm already CD'd into this folder. So the only thing I need to do to get this to work, same as I did last time, do ADK Web. And this will start a local service for me at port 8000, and I will be able to choose the agent of my choice and then be able to run this. So yeah, it has started the service. So all I need to do now is go to localhost 8000. And you will notice that the RAG data store is already selected. That was the only agent type that was already there. So it's basically going to allow me to run queries against this, right? So I can ask it the same question, like, hi there. And it should return an output, which should tell me what it's about. Like I said, you say, how can I help you with Google Earth Engine datasets today? So I'm going to copy the search that we were passing, and I'm going to try to paste that and perform the same exact search on high resolution land use and land cover datasets in the catalog, the resolutions and licenses and so on. So I'm going to hit return. And as I do that, you will notice that it starts invoking a bunch of things. So if I click on what it's invoking right now, you'll notice that it's first going to the Datastore agent. This is what's connecting to my Datastore. Think of this as like this virtual folder that I have, which has the entire website. It has the JSONs from the main catalog, as well as which is the stack JSONs from the main catalog. It also has JSONs from the community catalog. Now keep in mind, you do pay for storage for all of these things. So beware of the fact that even if you have this data set in some other location, whenever you're copying it over to a data store, the data store itself is like a storage that is done after all of the data has been parsed. So that's great. It ran through the analysis, and it says like, hey, there are several data store agents that that you can call upon, and you will notice here that it was basically able to get that answer really, really quickly. And it gave kind of like a summarization, and it told me what the data set is. And it gave me some comparison notes, some preview guidance, and so on, including link to the sample code. So this one was telling me just about the Chesapeake Bay high resolution, one. So I can actually open this, and it'll open up the script, and I can now click on run, and it should be able to run this code and add this land cover data if I wanted to, which is great, right? Let's ask one more just to be on the safe side, and let's ask a different question. So let's ask about a specific data set. Tell me about the Urban Watch land cover data set. Okay, I'm gonna hit run on that. It's going to go out there and hopefully use the same data store agent. Like I said, it's doing that right now. It's making a request to the data store agent. It's going to retrieve that, and in a few seconds, hopefully we'll see the same answer. So I'm going to come back to that. So you will notice here that it's also making a request to Google Search Agent. This is what I was talking about, that what it's trying to do right now is from the data store agent, it fetched that information, and then it goes to Google to enrich that piece of information with additional data if it was possible or available for that data set. So that's what it did, and you will notice here in the request that it got all of that extra information back from the Google search, apart from getting the data from the data search, right? The data store agent. So now it's basically giving me all of this additional pieces of information that has been enriched. Again, like I said, it gives me the direct link, so I can actually go to the direct link and find Urban Watch if I wanted to. And there's all this enriched content that's already available. It also found out that the Urban dataset can be accessed directly at Urban Watch website, and it links me to the website, so I'm able to go to the website and find additional information on that data set as well. So this being said, the last piece of content which I wanted to show you was just a bonus content, so this works great. An agent development toolkit allows you to do and achieve all of this with just a few lines of code. And if you actually look at what the agent is really calling, you will notice that the entire agent.py is not more than 62 lines of code, because this one is actually commented out because we're including the instructions from a different file. Of course, we wrote tools, and I understand that there are tools and additional things that you can add. But the power of really modularizing this is you can now break which agent does what. You can call agents sequentially, you can call agents in parallel, and do a bunch of other things. And if you're interested in doing all of those, if you're looking at running agents, there is a lot of additional tools on like function tools and MCP tools and so on. How exactly do you handle callbacks? What kind of agents are there? All of those information are actually included out here. So my recommendation is checking out the documentation. It's really, really interesting to learn from there. Okay, the last piece, like I said, is a bonus content. I always love the idea that you could take this ADK, but a lot of people would want to say like, hey, but what if I want to use this as an API? I don't want to use this UI. I don't want to use the way in which this looks. I want to use my own UI. What you might be able to see is that right now, when I go to localhost 8000, it automatically puts me into this page, and I go into this choose your, the type of interaction that you wanted to do. But what I really want to do is I can actually type in docs. And if I type in docs, this gives me a list of all the API calls I can make to this service that's running locally. And based on those API calls, I can actually build a UI that I want to build. So in this case, what I did was I was playing around with this UI that Google has actually also released in the past called Mesop. And Mesop is powerful because a lot of people have been playing around with it, and it's a way of building UI frameworks using pure Python. So you don't actually have to know any JavaScript or anything else to create a website, and you can actually still get experiences like this where you can come in and you can type words and you will get responses and so on. You will notice that it's basically able to generate, and there's a lot of control features that are built into this UI. So you can actually take those code snippets and you can build those. So in my case, what I wanted to do was I wanted to build a Mesop-based framework. So I took the API that was available to me, like as I was showing you all, and then I went ahead and I created a Mesop frontend. So all I need to do right now is, I've already included this in the repository that I'll make public at some point, is just type Mesop and then the code. And my apologies, I have to activate the environment to do that, and I just need to activate this and cd into this folder again. Perfect. And now I should be able to do Mesop and call the Mesop tool. So yeah, Mesop has started a server and localhost 32123. So we're going to navigate to that. And you will notice here, it actually says here, connected to API RAG Datastore, which is great, which is what we wanted to do. We wanted to call the ADK agent, but we wanted to call it to Mesop. And like I said, there's a lot of cool functionalities that you can build on your own. For example, if you wanted to do a new chat, you can basically create a new chat. If you click on the menu bar, it'll show you the chat history, similar to how you have it in Gemini and so on. In fact, you have the light mode and dark mode controllers. So if you wanted to do just a, like dark mode versus light mode, you can always switch that. You can refresh the API connection, and it comes preloaded with additional information. So the same question that I asked, right? Tell me about high resolution land cover datasets. I can just click on that and it's preloaded, and I can click on return. And what this will do in the back end, it's actually making requests to the same endpoint, to the same agents. And it's going to handle that negotiation between the Datastore agents and the search agents available in Google Earth Engine. So it's making all of these requests. And now let me ask it the specific question that we were asking in the first one. Okay, so as you will notice that it was streaming the output, so we're waiting for the output to actually complete. And like I said, it actually found out some of the links. So it found out the GLC FCS30D, it found out some enriched context. Like I said, it was going to Google and actually getting all of those. It also found out some other ones like map biomass land cover data, high resolution land cover data, Digital Earth Australia land cover data, and Urban Watch, and so on. So it gave me basically a list of all of those, including the links to those data sets if I wanted to look at those, and the license and known limitations. So this is what I mean by the fact that you can create your own experience when it comes to using ADK and build on top of what already exists. You could have a scenario where in the future I might do a small talk on that piece, which is building your own corpus on the fly. And think of corpus as another term for the data store, but a corpus allows you to do, like, imagine creating a virtual folder, and you can load in the docs that you want to load in, and you can ask questions to just that doc using instructions that you have. It's a more active approach where you can tell it and you can write code to automatically add data to that corpus. But what we are going to do in the future is create an agent where you'll be able to bring in docs and add those, and you'll be able to ask questions to that corpus itself. For now, this mimics an experience that goes into that search bar that I was showing you from the community catalog. But what it also does, because the community catalog search bar can't really go and search Google, this actually mixes those two. It takes the data from the community catalog and the main catalog searches from the data store, but it can also go to the World Wide Web, find additional information, and create these really enriched contexts that we couldn't find from just that piece. So I really hope that this gives you an understanding of why someone would go towards using something like the Agent Development Toolkit, specifically for building something like dataset searches, which is such one of those fundamental pieces that I feel people want to answer, because there's a transformation that's happening in the geospatial world with data deluge, right? Too much data. We want to understand which data set to use for what purposes. And as you can imagine, people can improve the instructions really better. People can give it better instructions to be more helpful and suggest more methodological pieces in using the data set in the future. And I implore people who want to build on top of this to go do that. So I hope you enjoyed this, and till the next time. Thanks.